This is the Slots and Sockets podcast, episode number 60. I am one of your hosts, IRD Moose, and my partner in crime,
Turbo Penguin.
Happy Monday to you, Turbo. And
Same to you.
It's been kind of a slow news week. We spent the last little bit trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about, and we got a couple of interesting things.
It's boring.
So
There's not a lot going on.
Well, speaking of boring, looks like to kind of get us kicked off here, Nvidia's released another another driver to fix the broken issues. Sorry, I didn't mean to assume that it's broken right out of the gate. I haven't tested it, so, you know.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just this ongoing thing. It's kind of this, kind of a joke.
Almost like it's 2010 for AMD.
I know, right? So there is a new one. You should probably go to Reddit and see if it's worth getting, if it fixes some problems. They still have outstanding known issues. That's not an uncommon thing, but just double check to make sure that what you're hoping to achieve is fixed and hopefully doesn't bring on more bugs.
Right.
It seems like just maybe, some of these things are maybe getting a little bit better with this as they're like realizing that they've done dumb things. Mm-hmm. But we'll see.
They violated rule number 1, which we covered last episode.
Yeah, don't do dumb things. And then, the only really big thing, and I think that a lot of gamers aren't going to see this as a big thing, is that we're really getting some solid figures, a couple of leaks from some European vendors on the 9060 XT.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that these are more or less just confirming the specs that we had before. This close, we're expecting to see that about a week and a half from today. It'll be soon.
It'll be about
we actually see it
about a week, because everybody's flying out on next Monday as we record the show. And the show actually kind of gets started on Tuesday, but really gets rolling on Wednesdays. Middle of next week, we'll start having some stuff. To actually talk about.
Yeah. So 9060 XT. What's interesting is it's you can kind of, if you kind of put them side by side, you can kind of see where this is really going to be a very interesting piece, because of the 9000 series. The 9060 has the highest clock. It looks like a clock at 3.2 gigahertz. But what they're doing is they gave it the same RAM, VRAM as the 9070 and 9070 XT at 20 gigabits, but really kind of gimped it on the memory bus. And so it's legitimately, because of the memory bus, half of the speed of a 9070 XT. So it'll be interesting to see where this lands. It's become very clear that we do not expect to see, well, I don't know. I think there's rumors that we won't see an 8 gigabyte at launch, but we might. And this will be an interesting card to see where it pans out on the performance perspective. I think the loaded question is most people are going to be looking at is, how does it compare to a 5060 Ti? I think everyone thinks the 5060 is going to just crap itself, which I think it will. The fact, Nvidia doesn't even believe in it to give out pre-release drivers, so they don't. They want to sell as many before people realize how crappy it is. I don't expect that with this, and I fully expect the 9060 XT will probably clean the shop floor of the 5060. I expect this to be more competitive at that 5060 Ti level.
Yep.
Especially in the 16 gig version. So will be interesting. This is another card that, with the higher clocks, this one could be interesting also. It only has 1 8-pin, at least on the standard models. So you will be limited on how much power this card can actually use. 75 watts plus 150. So it's really going to cap out roughly at about 225.
Yeah,
total.
and
And
the
I don't
interesting
expect it
thing,
to be close to that.
right? And one of the interesting things here is it's a buy 8 card, but it's using a buy 16 slots. So we might actually see some vendors like we saw in the past where they extend the board a little bit and give you a couple of M.2 slots. That I think that would be a really nice add-on
Or
there for the card.
or I could see kind of we saw this with the 5060
Hmm.
Ti, a couple of creatives where they were making a very small form, like the micro form
Hmm.
factors, whereas half board height to fit into some. That could be a very interesting form factor.
Yeah.
Um, because it's only using, and we saw a couple of those on the 5060 Ti's. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what the vendors actually end up giving us for this. Um, this could this entry level piece is not something we've seen a lot of this, but we could see a more push for smaller boards,
Hmm.
more creative on what you're able to do. And as we're getting a little bit more efficient, like the nice thing is that when it's all said and done, you know, the GRE uses 220 watts. I think it's wildly acceptable that we're expecting this car to use easily sub 200. So I would expect 120 to 150. So you really only need just that 1/8 pin. And if you had somebody to make an 8X and make it smaller, could be a really interesting little form factor. And if we're really seeing more of these 8X PCIe's like graphics cards, could be interesting to see maybe some of these little pucks integrate a by 16 with like a single 8X,
Hmm.
and if that could like give some boosted upgrade ability to some of these little pucks. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think that APUs are for sure going to be much stronger.
Yeah.
But if you had an 8X, because an 8X is much smaller, and if you only had 8X graphics cards, like with a like a a 8 pin or or the 2x6, as if you want to do the Nvidia side,
Hmm.
um, could be an interesting upgrade path for some of these, and just like cap it off at like, say, look, it really is only going to be 150 watts. That way we don't have to have a giant power supply.
Yep.
Um, could be
Well, I
interesting.
mean, you can get SFF kilowatt power supplies now, so I don't think power for small form factor is a huge issue.
Well, but if
But
you're going to do it
you're
on a
talking the
NUC,
micros, yeah, like the
yeah, I'm
NUCs and
talking the
stuff,
Tide.
where you got a
It,
laptop style adapter. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
it could be interesting. I mean, the thing is I think for most gamers, the 9060 for a number of gamers will be intriguing. But I think that a lot of gamers are really in that 599, 549 where the 9070 sits right now.
Yeah.
Um, I really think that's kind of the sweet spot where a lot of gamers are wanting to be. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm waiting to hear what reviews look at, because while it's a very interesting from a design perspective, they've done some choices that are very unique.
Hmm.
Um, the question will be is it how does this all work out? And they have not killed off the 8 gigabyte model of this, so you do want
Yeah.
to make sure. I think the loaded question will be with only 2000 cores. Um, if I had 16, could you actually effectively use it with only 128-bit bus? You're you
Mm,
might have gimped yourself so much on the memory bus that you really can't utilize the full 16.
yeah.
But that begs the question is that if you can't use 16, could you effectively use 12, and should this be just a 12 gigabyte board and just get one SKU out of it? I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah.
um
Well, I think the other thing too is that as AMD keeps pushing APUs, we're probably going to start seeing cards like the 9060 XT die off, really, because if you can get that much horsepower into your CPU package or your APU package, there's really no point in having these cards at that point.
Well, and I think, to some respect, I think AMD is trying to find a fine line, because the 9070 XT and the 9070 are at good price points. I think the XT at MSRP is a really, really good buy. But unfortunately, you don't find those at MSRP.
Yeah,
The other half is that I think they're really running out of pricing space of how they price these things.
right.
So it'll be interesting to see where some of the final pricing and what the street pricing is. Like if I go to Micro Center, or if I go to Amazon, how much is that going to be? I think that's the loaded question. Hopefully, we've seen some positive news here in the United States with tariffs with China. So hopefully tariffs aren't that big of a deal, but who knows? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. We'll see what that looks like. I think the real question is obviously don't pre-order anything. Obviously wait until you see real reviews. Don't buy a 5060 at all. Just, don't do dumb things.
yep,
Even if reviews are good, it's going to suck. You won't get good reviews. If you have good reviews out there, you need to question that website's relationship with Nvidia and them making money by
yeah.
putting out a positive review. That thing is going to absolutely eat crap. Um, and the other kind of, I mean, it's been a slow week, but there is Gigabyte trying to steal Sapphire's Nitro Plus design by hiding the 2x6.
Yeah.
Um, I think the only reason that maybe some board manufacturers were hesitant of doing this is because you wouldn't see the your PC catching on fire because it's
When
hidden
your connector melts, yeah.
when your connector
Especially on a
melts.
1590. I
So
mean,
is
that's the
uh,
melty one.
I guess the question is if you don't if no one sees the melty connector, did the connector melt?
Yes, because you
When a
can
tree
usually
falls in the
smell
forest
it.
and no, but if a tree falls in the forest and no one's here to hear it, does
Right.
a tree fall? It's
Right.
it's like if you can't see the melty stuff, maybe, just maybe, it doesn't
No, it melts.
exist.
It just smells even worse and has
Because it goes longer
yeah.
because you don't see the flames.
Right, right,
Look,
exactly.
if
Exactly.
on my 2x6, I want to see it straight up, because if my thing's gonna burn, I want the sucker to burn. Let's just
Burn
go
good. Yep. Burn, baby, burn.
burn, baby, burn, baby.
Connector Inferno.
I know, right? I mean, if you're gonna do it well.
For legal reasons, that was a parody.
Freaking A.
Oh shoot.
Realistically, though, guys, that's really it. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess there's like
I mean,
four
we
people
had a
who
couple
care
of
that there's a Intel Arc B580 floating around with 24 gigs of memory
yeah.
that's no one's going to care for. Maybe it's a good way of getting 24 gigs of RAM in something that's not useful. I don't know how the use case for that is.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I saw two stories that kind of piqued my interest a little bit that um the Ryzen AI Max parts are now starting to show up in vendors locations where you could actually just buy the chip. But again, that's a BGA part. So, unless you're crazy like me or you already have a solution to do a BGA rework, it's not really going to help you much. But what might actually help you is AMD has confirmed that the Ryzen Threadripper Pro 9000WX series is coming out. Now, it will potentially be a very small number of us that care about that, but Zen 5 coming to Threadripper is a very good thing, I think. And it's just a return of enthusiast desktop parts because we haven't really had any movement in the enthusiast side of the spectrum for quite a while. And I mean, I used to run an enthusiast part. I loved my i7 950, beat the snot out of for nearly a decade before the board blew up. And if you're looking for something where you got enough budget to make it happen, I think these parts are going to scream for a very long time. Like even the 3000 series and 5000 series Threadrippers are still very very good performers right now. It's just getting
Yeah,
parts for them is a real pain.
I think that, yeah, and I think a lot of gamers are realizing, the loaded question will be like, what's the boost in performance for use case scenarios for gamers? I don't know. My guess is it'll be faster. The question is what's the cost of benefit?
Yeah.
You know,
I
because I
mean,
really think the 9800 X3D is just so good. And yeah, the
yeah.
9950 X3D is better in games, and it's really good if you go both ways. The
Mhm.
question will be is like, where does this fit in that? I think it's good. I just think that what we're starting to see is the desktop parts are so good
Yeah.
that you're really you're maximizing what really you're going to get out of it. If you're somebody who's bought some, who doesn't have something and you're building, maybe it makes sense. But I don't know if I'm going to see a bunch of 9800 X3D or even 7800 X3D owners go out and be like, I want to go that way,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
just don't know. But for someone who goes both ways, who's AI and content creation and does some gaming, that'll be a really lucrative piece. But I
Mhm.
also look at that and say we've kind of already done that with a 9950 X3D. So I really think
Yeah.
that's going to be more the business and prosumer side of things. But the question is that I think a lot of the prosumer stuff is really shifting towards graphics.
Mhm.
If you're not going to pick up like a really strong NPU or AI accelerator, I don't know how well that will fare long term if we think AI is thing. But well, let's be honest here, real quick. We haven't brought this up. Um, where's all the AI apps? Like for like they have all this like AI, the Copilot crap. You know, Microsoft and these developers have not used AI NPUs at all.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess if you're running something locally, but I mean, it's almost like you've got to be a developer to do something like that because everything ends up being on the cloud. So if I have a laptop with an NPU, what good do I have? I'd make
Yeah.
the argument I don't have any good use out of it.
Cuz any GPU you could buy with that laptop integrated is going to be better uh at AI tasks than
I,
what's integrated into the APU or the
it's
CPU. It just doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. But I mean, kind of circling back to the Threadripper though, I think for gamers, the play would be PCI Express slots and longevity because I'm starting to see some interesting threads of people taking advantage of DirectX's capability to support heterogeneous GPUs. And so, you could potentially build a system out where you could take full advantage of the bandwidth of your,
yeah,
Gen 5 bandwidth to a 9070 XT and get all the AMD goodness. And then at the same time, throw in a 5070 and take advantage of NVIDIA's AI improvements and stuff like that. Um, you
that's
know,
also just going to assume that. I mean, in all honesty, that there's a practical use. I mean, I don't see people going into Best Buy or buying a PC based on its AI,
yeah.
capabilities because I don't think AI is being done on the local machines.
Well,
Maybe
very
that's
few
something
people
that's
are doing that. Yeah.
coming, but I just don't see. I just don't see it. I
I mean, I do AI stuff locally just with image generation. And there's a few people out there like if you're familiar with the AI VTuber Neurosama. That's actually run completely locally on uh, Vettel's PC.
Mhm.
He runs two different, actually multiple AI models simultaneously on his 4090.
Mhm.
And so I think having a something like a Threadripper might actually be beneficial in that sort of use case. But again, you're talking about a CPU that's got 32 cores and 64 threads. Um, Games are not going to be using that. They don't even use the full beans on a 9800 X3D.
Well,
So,
that's it. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. Like, it's
yeah,
like,
the benefits you'd be buying if you bought in a part like this, the benefits you'd be buying for are more long term, where you can take advantage of having those threads down the line when games start taking advantage of 16 threads and you're doing like streaming and other stuff in the background at the same time you're also doing your gaming stuff. It's kind of that same sort of market that the 9950 X3D has. It's just you're throwing even more cores at it instead of the 3D cache.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that actually turns into something. But I don't know. I think AI is, it's just a word that so many like marketing people want to use.
Mhm.
Yet for the actual end case users, and I believe this, I think users are just like, whatever, I use AI and it just uses the cloud. I don't think they have any clue that
Yeah.
it's done on the cloud. And two, I think that there's so few people who are doing it locally on their machine that it's absolutely useless to be making these pieces for them.
Yeah. You're either a
I
developer or somebody who's playing with it because you're passionate in it. And
but like a
that's really
laptop
it.
with an NPU, like my laptop has an NPU,
Mhm.
absolutely useless.
Mhm. Except to get Microsoft's uh AI spyware on there.
I mean, it's
Because,
absolutely
oh,
useless.
you've got an NPU. I'm going to install the spyware so we can take screenshots of your desktop every 2 seconds and upload it to the CIA.
Anyway, I just think
Yeah,
it's kind of
it's
silly
crazy.
because I just don't see anyone using it.
No,
And I think gamers are like, why do we have this?
yeah.
I think there's probably a good chance of why we have these things.
I think
Um,
once we kind of get the AI stuff smoothed over, we could see some very interesting things in the gaming realm. Unreal Engine has some stuff in it for AI directed characters where basically you build a character sheet for your NPCs in a game, and then it will, based on that definition of the character and all that fun stuff, uh, it will animate and respond to you actually speaking to it rather than picking predefined prompts.
mhm.
And so, like a game like Mass Effect, where that game was very, very well written until you got to the last two games, and then it fell apart. Um, but if you had a universe like that where it the NPCs were AI driven, you could go in and have a completely different experience from somebody else who played the game on their machine, and being able to run that locally to generate the speech and generate the actions, I think would be a cool thing to play with. I don't know if it's something that would go long term, but it there's a lot of interesting stuff that's, I think, solutions looking for a problem.
Mhm.
And that I think is for most people where AI is right now. Um, and like you said, the average end user is really not going to do a whole lot with AI. They might play around with some image generation, but they'll use generation sites to play with it rather than doing it locally.
Mhm.
Even if they have the hardware to do it, because still doing it locally can be a pretty big pain. Um, but yeah, I think eventually AI is just going to become like physics or variable frame rate or variable refresh rate displays, or any number of technologies that have just become standard, that eventually it's just going to hit a point where it's no longer a buzzword and nobody's going to care about it. The whole reason it's blowing up now is because it's the new shiny.
I think most people don't care about it.
No, you're right. But the companies do, and they're trying to convince you to care about it, because AI is coming for our gerbs and all that stuff. But I don't think it's going to be what everybody thinks it is now. But then again, I have no idea what it's going to end up being. So yeah, on that bombshell, I think it's time we call it a little bit of a shorter episode this week, because it was a light week. And I want to thank you all for giving us a little bit of your time. And do remember to do all the algorithmic goodness down the doobly-doo below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz. And until next time, have fun storming the castle.
Good night, everybody. Have a good one.
Good night.